Hello and welcome to this week's Opening Bell podcast. I'm Boxing News editor Tris Dixon and joined as ever by Matt Christie, my trusty sidekick. Matt, loads and loads of boxing last weekend. What was the high point for you?
I think because it was unexpected was the Erislandy Lara Alfredo Angulo fight was my personal highlight.
That's quite fun. I mean, I've got to say I haven't seen that fight yet. It's on the planner to watch this evening, but it was funny, weren't we just saying that was going to be a stinker last week?
Yeah, we obviously touched on the fact that Angulo would be a threat because he's a hard puncher, but we didn't anticipate anything like that. It was astonishing.
I think it's shown two things really. One, that Angulo is made for exciting fights almost no matter who he fights, unless he's so dominant he's allowed to fight at his own pace, in which case he can take rounds off and be a bit lethargic. But it also shows that Lara's not afraid to mix it up a little bit too, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, Lara. I thought Lara should get a lot of kudos for that. The way he dragged himself off the deck off two pretty heavy knockdowns, and then came back, and then he kind of put the finishing touches to what at times was a masterclass in the 10th round was very impressive.
We had Steve Kim ringside in Carson for us. At one of my favourite venues, the Home Depot Centre or Home Depot Centre. In fact, it's not even that anymore. It's the StubHub Centre, a great venue where I've seen some really good fights over the years. However, in all my time there, and with the amount of fights I've seen there, I don't think I've seen a worse injury than the one Angulo sustained, which we have a picture here in this week's issue, which is available on newsstands and to download now if we get a quick plug out of the way. Then it's a grotesque injury in the left eye of Angulo.
Yeah, and it suddenly just started to blow up, and when the kind of the cameras went close to the injury, it was one of those moments where you did turn away and you're just like, good grief, how do these guys do it? It was an astonishing injury.
We didn't think we'd get anyone to challenge Lebedev for the worst injury of the year stakes, but he's a worthy challenger, isn't he?
Yeah. I don't think it's not quite as bad, but no, I can certainly see why when he felt that he turned around and walked away from combat, because that must have been incredibly painful. And
I think Steve's alluded to it in his copy that it reminded him somewhat of the hematoma suffered by Hasim Rahman against Evander Holyfield, which was another of those horrendous, freaky things where it looks like someone's trying to smuggle some kind of tennis ball underneath their skin.
Yeah, it looks like a little grenade that's about to go off, and I think he probably would have done if Lara had been allowed to keep punching it.
Which is obviously where there was controversy over Lebedev a few weeks ago when Guillermo Jones was allowed to tee off on that injury, which was tough to watch, and you had to have a strong stomach to get through that.
Yeah, you did. Angulo made some comments which may have been fueled by machismo in the aftermath, saying that he hadn't asked for it to be stopped and what have you, but his body language told the tale there, and you can't question his heart or his guts for walking away from the fight with an injury like that.
Okay, you talk about heart and guts. The main eventers, as expected in Carson, delivered both heart and guts by the spade, really. When Argentine banger, I was going to say Lucas Matisse, I'm supposed to say that after Argentine banger, yeah. Marcos Maidana and Josecito Lopez shared 6 violent rounds. We knew it was going to be good. I'm not trying to say that we're always right, because we're not, and it wasn't an uncommon thought, was it, that Marcos Maidana and Lopez were going to deliver the goods, were they?
No, they always had those. I think we said it last week. We had that they've got the styles to really complement each other, to bring the best out in each other and the worst out in each other, and it made for the spectacle that the vast majority expected.
I've got to say, I was a little bit surprised with Lopez, really. Yes, he has the heart to fight fire with fire, but I didn't really think he had the tools to fight fire with Maidana. So why try?
Well, I'm not convinced he hasn't got the tools. I think the difference there was just that Maidana hits so much harder than Lopez, and he although he had Maidana wobbling a few times, it was Maidana's punches that were clearly having the more devastating effect, and I think that was the difference between the two. At times I thought Lopez boxed exceptionally well. There's some lovely counters he landed, but he just couldn't stand the firepower, and he's another way. He complained about the stoppage afterwards. He certainly had a better case for it than Angulo, but in that kind of situation, I think the referee was right to do what he did. It's all well and good saying, well, Lopez is a tough so-and-so and, give him a chance.
It doesn't give him the right to be stretched out.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's the kind of, he was pinned in a corner. You're 4 punches away from a Ray Mercer, Tommy Morrison kind of situation if you're not careful in those. I would much rather see a fight stopped a little bit too soon than too late, because boxing is, as we all know, is a dangerous sport.
Be interesting to see what these two do next. There's talk in the magazine. Richard Schaefer said to Steve Kim that he's got an eye on making Maidana against the winner of Malignaggi Broner. I mean, if they're saying that Broner's jumping 2 weights to fight a feather-fisted welterweight, well, he wouldn't be fighting a feather-fisted welterweight if he did fight Maidana.
No, that's true. I'd be interested to see that. I really would be interested to see Broner against Maidana. I think we'll talk more about Maidana Malignaggi next week. But yeah, certainly that's you can argue a little bit that perhaps Malignaggi is not the biggest test in that division, but certainly Maidana would be one of them.
There is something about Broner Malignaggi I'm looking forward to. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's one of those where the build-up's almost certainly going to be more colourful than the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm somehow looking forward to the fight. It's weird, isn't it? I mean, it could go one or two ways. It could be a stinker, or I think Broner could dominate.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think because although Broner's potential is obvious, he's still at that stage of his career where we're kind of waiting for him to really explode and make a statement, and potentially this could be the moment against Malignaggi.
And like you say, we'll say more next week, but while we're on that subject, I mean, people do hold that Daniel Ponce de Leon performance against him now, don't they? And he's at a level, and because of his persona and how he carries himself and how he lords himself up as the next big thing in boxing, he sets a standard. So every time he doesn't sparkle and look sensational, he's going to be pulled to shreds, isn't he?
He is, yeah, and he's certainly with his antics. In his post-fight interviews, outside the ring, he's certainly setting himself up for a huge fall. But guys like Broner very often get away with it. But yeah, we'll see what happens against Malignaggi. It's two weight classes is still a huge leap. It's not easy. It won't be easy.
Interesting. Okay, more on that next week, and we'll be back with some odds for that fight next week. Although I can briefly, just looking at my screen now, just tell you Broner's a 1-12 on favourite with most places, and Malignaggi commonly you can get 8-1 as an underdog. So we'll go into that in more detail next week. But I think 8-1, that might be the longest odds Malignaggi's faced in his career. Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So elsewhere on a very, very busy Saturday night, there was a hell of a shock, wasn't there, in Montreal? I mean, let's face it, we were looking at Chad Dawson thinking would he be the same fighter he was after he brought himself down in weight to fight Andre Ward? Adonis Stevenson tells us Dawson will never be the same fighter again. Do you agree?
Probably now. I'm not. I don't think the fight was enough had happened in the fight to know how much that weight drain will have had effect it will have had on Chad. I think he went in there more gung ho than I've seen him in the majority of his fights, with very little respect for Adonis Stevenson, and he paid the price very early. It was a stunning finish, and again Dawson, somebody else over the weekend who was complaining about an early stoppage. He could not object to that because he was on another planet.
We had Paul Salgado ringside for that one, and I think you're right. It was a sensational finish. I mean, Adonis Stevenson chinned Chad in 80-odd seconds, 76 seconds or so, in what's most likely the year's quickest upset. And I think, Matt, what might be most pleasing about this for you is that you had a decent relationship with Emmanuel Stewart, didn't you? Well, we all did, to be fair, but I know that you spent a lot of time with him over the last couple of years of his life, and Adonis was always someone that he praised you, wasn't he?
Yeah. We spoke about it last week, and I picked Dawson to win, and kind of Manny's words were ringing in my ear when I watched Adonis just blitz Dawson, and he kind of promised me that the first chance that Adonis and Stevenson got to win a world belt, he'd take it, and he more than did that. And there was something good about seeing Adonis Stevenson do that in those iconic yellow Kronk shorts, Stevenson blazing across his waist. It did bring back some memories, and yeah, I mean, full credit to Stevenson, and I'm sure that he's got the. He's got gives a lot of credit to the late Manny Stewart.
Got any Emmanuel Stewart stories you feel like sharing today?
Maybe not today. I can't think of any off the top of my head now. I mean, there's
Well, I tell you what, you have to think about it. I'll just say the one thing that always remember is when I joined Boxing News as a staffer, I'd already spoken to Emmanuel many times over the years as a freelance writer. And when I joined the staff, Manny, and I saw him in the USA, Manny told me how much he actually enjoyed the publication and how he always ordered, he subscribed and had two subscriptions to the magazine. One so that he always had one to keep in the house, and Andy Lee said that they were always lying around the house when he was living with him, and two to take around the gyms to show his fighters whenever they were in them. And it's nice that someone in the USA is sort of really pushing the magazine, as we were just then. When I joined Boxing News, we were very much just a print-based magazine. Now, obviously, we've got the website, we've got podcasts, we've got apps. We do, one-shots like the 100 Greatest Fighters. We've done a live show last year. Things were different then, and Manny was really an advocate for Boxing News, which was great for us. When you've got someone like Emmanuel Stewart in your corner, in and out of the ring, it made a massive difference, and it made you feel like $1 million too.
He did. He always had time for you. That's what I remember most about Manny, is that you'd phone him, and whatever he was doing, he would stop doing that, and he would sit down and have a conversation with you, and you would say, "Look, Manny, I know you're busy." You'd ask him one question, you'd get a half an hour answer, but the thing is with that answer, it wasn't half an hour where it was easy to go in and edit it. It was all gold. Yeah. It was all brilliant stuff, and his boxing mind was one of the best that I've encountered, and certainly one that we still miss today. But I mean, I've spoke to Jonathan Banks, his young protege, a few times since Manny's death, and he seems to have inherited a lot of Manny's wisdom, and he provided a very interesting column for us a few weeks ago, didn't he, or maybe a month or so ago, and it seems that Banks is taking off from where Manny left off.
Yeah, it seems like the Kronk's got a sort of new lease of life, funnily enough, doesn't it? With Banks doing so well. Obviously, Banks has his own big test in the rematch with Seth Mitchell next week. So tell me about Stevenson. Now, here in the magazine, you've put something here about the 5 or 6 guys he could meet next. Pick one guy. Only name one guy on that list. Who should he fight next, and why?
I'd like to see him against the Butte Pascal winner. I just think for pure entertainment, it would be an exceptional fight. I think the person who deserves it is Bellew, because he's the number one contender. But I think if you just want for pure entertainment, and I think I'd pick Pascal over Butte, so I'd say Stevenson against Pascal would be a huge event in Canada.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is the most mouth-watering fight, and you know what? I think they might even try and squeeze Bellew in. I think they might even, bearing in mind Butte Pascal is going to be December, January time. They might be overlooking Tony Bellew and think, yeah, we'll do that. We'll get him out of the way, and then we'll get the big one next year.
Yeah, and I think that's a massive, massive mistake to overlook Tony Bellew in all this. I think Stevenson, and I do not want to, disregard his achievements in knocking out Chad Dawson in one round, because I can guarantee that nobody will have predicted that beforehand. But there's also a danger that result flatters Adonis. Although he's always shown that crunching, punching power, he's still very much a crude operator, and you could almost see flashes of that in the opening seconds of this bout, because Dawson was landing. It wasn't like Stevenson came out and just walked right through him. So I'm not saying I'd pick Bellew over Stevenson. What I'm saying is that don't discount Tony, because I think that's completely unfair.
Bit disappointed on the undercard by the appearance of Yuriorkis Gamboa. A little bit drab, his fight with Darles Perez. Not sure why he wasn't firing on all cylinders. Hopefully it's not to do with him starting to follow us on Twitter. Boxing News Ed. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure why. I mean, I think you could easily put it down to inactivity, though, couldn't you? And ring rust.
Yeah, you could do.
Or lack of motivation now. I think he's.
I think that's it.
Where he wants big time
Yeah,
fights.
I think that's it. He was like he was bored out of his mind at times in there, and he had an opportunity there to really kind of remind us of how special he is. And he didn't take it. Didn't think he ever looked like losing. Although I did take the opportunity to hang my washing up at one point during that fight, and that's true.
You didn't miss anything?
No, I don't think I missed anything. So you know, I mean, I've still got hope that Gambo will get that fight that his potential deserved. But at the same time, I've still got that fear that potential will never become the ability that he always should have done.
I seem to say it most weeks, but you know, there's something about guys who are fast and powerful. They're not the guys who have success into their mid-30s, and Gambo's 31 now.
Yeah, exactly.
So the time is now, isn't it?
Yeah, and you think if you look at his frame as well, he's quite short. You know, he's got these short, stocky arms and what have you. I think that as soon as that speed goes, he's going to find a few losses on the record, and we may never see the best of him.
Okay, so back on this side of the pond, where in Germany, in Berlin, Marco Huck put an exclamation mark on the trilogy with Ola Afolabi, didn't he, really?
Yeah, he did. I thought the fight was slightly anticlimactic, but Huck certainly proved he's the superior of the two, and credit to him for doing that.
Credit to Afolabi for taking him some real bombs in there as well, didn't he?
Oh,
Took some
yeah.
really big shots.
Yeah.
Marco Huck, a lot of defences now, one of the best cruiserweights going around at the moment. Hall of Famer in the future?
Do you know what I was about to say? Isn't it? You when you said going around at the moment, you could make an argument that he's one of the best of all time. One of the best cruiserweights of all time, not pound for pound.
Yeah.
But I mean, think about it. You know, name another 10 cruiserweights that have achieved more than Marco Huck has.
Well, it is interesting that you say that, because you know, outside in the office, away from here, we were actually just saying today, in fact, about some active fighters who will be in the Hall of Fame. Let me just shoot some names at you. Chad Dawson. I know these are guys who have still got all to play with, but I mean, bearing in mind where he could be and where he is, will he get in the Hall of Fame?
I doubt it. I think he'll be on the ballot, but I don't think he'll make it through. I don't think he'll make it through the doors. I just don't think he's excited enough people. And although he has dominated for a while at light heavyweight, his form has been patchy.
Antonio Tarver?
No.
Miguel Cotto?
Yes.
David Haye?
Probably not at the moment.
You reckon? Yeah, you don't think
I don't think he's a fair. I don't think he's a fair. If he was to come back and he was to win a title again, then I think he's got a really strong case. I'd say no on first ballot. But you know, when you think of like the likes of Nassim Hamed and people like that, are still not being recognised. I'm not convinced that, or Nigel Benn. I'm not convinced that David Haye will be. That's not to say he doesn't deserve a place there, with ruling at cruiserweight and winning a portion of the heavyweight title. Let's just say I don't think that people will vote him in.
Okay. All right, we could perhaps have a look at more of those next week. In the UK, James DeGale fought Stepan Bocic. Were you impressed with DeGale?
I was really impressed with DeGale. He did what he had to do against not the best opponent in the world, or rather an opponent who's certainly seen better days. But as ever, he didn't really do himself any favours after the fight with his outbursts at Richie Woodhall. But James he's a passionate guy, and he's probably just getting a bit sick of the lack of respect that's floating around. And you know, DeGale, I think he's on the right road. I think he's still on the right road. If he'd have got that decision against Groves, I think he'd have potentially been a world champion by now.
I still think, I mean, it's all about the fights, isn't it? I mean, you could say he'd be a world champion in his next fight if he got the right opponent, but I think when you look at the division, how deep it is, I think he's probably about 3 fights away.
Definitely, yeah. I'm not for 1 second suggesting that he should fight for a world title now. He doesn't deserve it. However, if he'd have beaten Groves, he probably would have then been in a position in his next couple of fights to prove that. So he's still kind of working his way back. The only the opponents he's fighting at the moment are not brilliant, but at least he's staying busy, and that's the important thing for James at the moment.
We both like the way Hughie Fury's going about his business, don't we?
Yeah, we were talking about that this morning. It's I think I noticed a forum post saying something about Hughie Fury, and some people were criticising the fact that he's fighting every 2 weeks against inferior opposition. But ultimately, the fact that he's fighting so often is crucial to a fighter's development at that stage.
There's about 50 fighters in this country that would give their right arms to be able to fight as often as he is.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got a good amateur background.
Fighting again in Norwich this weekend as well.
Yeah. Good amateur background. Is obviously the family ties he's got. So he's got he's got a healthy platform there. But very often you see these guys that have got these sort of background kind of take their time. Every fight has to be an event. And some of the sparkle goes, but I think Hughie and his team are doing exactly the right thing, just staying active and just getting out there. No reason why they can't do that more often.
3 years from now, Fury versus Fury for all the gold at heavyweight.
I'd probably say no, but you never know.
Could you see them fighting each other?
Well, I mean,
they said that they wouldn't.
Yeah, they've said they wouldn't.
Money talks, doesn't it?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a huge surprise if they. I mean, like I was saying, it would be an absolute jaw dropper if we were to come in tomorrow and find that the two Klitschko's had signed to fight each other. Wouldn't be quite so much of a surprise if the two Furies agreed to get it on.
Do you think brothers actually shouldn't fight? And I mean, I do mean this. I mean, when you think of it as a sporting landscape, when you look at it's a common analogy, but when you look at the Williams sisters in tennis, they're playing a sport. Boxing, I know you don't play boxing. I'm not suggesting for a moment that you do, but a lot of brothers spar together. Sometimes that gets out of hand, and we've seen some horrible spectacles where a father has lost to a son as well. Remember that in Belgium?
Oh yeah.
But could you ever imagine two brothers fighting, especially on that kind of scale? And I mean, if the Furies were to fight, it would be a huge fight, an event, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, they are cousins, aren't they? They are cousins. But yeah, of course, it would be something like that. Would just be an absolutely huge event. But I can imagine. I think even if I think that kind of sibling rivalry that does exist, kind of in the day to day, if we was to see that kind of spill over into the boxing ring, as much as you'd watch it, I think it could also be an absolutely awful spectacle.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, and then also just in our roundup, Lenny Dawes fell short in Italy. Lenny, good fighter, European level fighter, has been inactive over the last sort of 12 months, even 18 months. I think he's had his own issues away from the ring. Really nice guy. Sad to see him fall short, really. Yeah,
it was. Yeah, a lot of time for Lenny. He's always, he's another boxer who's always got so much time to speak to you. And I think really his major undoing there is exactly what you've just said there, the inactivity.
Okay, that will do us for this first half. Now we'll just leave you for a quick word with our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
William Hill, sponsors of the Opening Bell podcast. Bet £25 and get a £25 bet free. Bet now with WilliamHill.com.
Hello, welcome back to the second half of the podcast. I think Matt's still with us. He looks to be hanging in there. Matt, so the issue, hot off the press, now available on the newsstands and from iTunes and Pocket Mags. What's the highlights in there for you this week?
Well,
I will say, I mean, let's face it, this is Manny Pacquiao finished. I'm probably sure that is your highlight, but given that you wrote it, can you actually not pick it?
Oh, right, okay, so I need to think of something else.
Yeah.
Oh.
Do you want to go to another commercial?
Okay, now there's a couple of interesting things here. The one thing that really does excite me is if anybody out there has read the superb book Year of the Locust, will probably be pleased to hear that that the actor, writer, director, and friend of Boxing News, subscriber Paddy Considine, is actually going to bring that book to the big screen, and he's making a film. For those that don't know, it's briefly Tim Doc Anderson, a heavyweight journeyman in the late 80s, 90s, kind of got entangled in a relationship with promoter Rick Parker that all ended rather messily, but it's a fascinating tale of many layers. The book is superbly written, and I think, I remember when I was reading it a couple of years ago thinking that it would make a sensational film, and I'm sure that Paddy will do it justice. And we've got an interview here with Paddy, kind of talking about, you know, his interest in this story, also a little bit about his past and his interest in boxing, and that's a really interesting piece. Kind of staying on the heavyweight theme, which I am guilty of from time to time.
It's your big passion.
It is.
I think
I'm looking.
Heavyweights, I think.
Yeah, and also one of my favourite things that we've brought into the magazine in the last 18 months or so is a section that's called My Career, and it's quite simple, but it's just kind of goes over a fighter's their greatest night, hardest puncher they fought, their toughest night, hardest part of retirement, worst night, best they sparred. This week we've got former WBC heavyweight champion Pinklon Thomas, who was one of the more gifted of that era, which incidentally, that 1980s era, I remember at the time, people saying, God, this is the worst era of all time, this is dreadful, this is diabolical. We almost look back on that now with rose-tinted glasses, thinking that they were...
Quite fondly.
Yeah. Because, you know, the likes of Pinklon Thomas, the likes of Tim Witherspoon, obviously all headed by Larry Holmes, is not a bad pack at all when you look back on it now, when you compare it to not necessarily the top today, but the lower echelons of the top 10 today. But yeah, some of Pinklon Thomas, they're really interesting to read, brings back lots of memories.
Some of the stuff I like actually in this My Career is often hidden in that section, Best I Sparred.
Yeah.
And because obviously they're not guys that you associated them actually fighting.
Yeah.
So you wonder sort of how the fight would have gone between them and stuff. And Pinklon Thomas, a nice little surprise from Pinklon in there.
Yeah.
So that's quite an interesting bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Another one you just brought. The one I always enjoy is hardest puncher I fought, and we was talking about this the other day. 99 times out of 10, the hardest puncher they fought is not the guy that knocked them senseless. It's someone that they stood up to, and Pinklon has picked someone that he stood up to. And I'll just say that it's not Mike Tyson who nearly took his head off.
Who he does actually say he talks about in there, so it must be in his thoughts somewhere.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay, just on that heavyweight theme, what was quite funny is that not many of our listeners or viewers for that matter, will know one of your heavyweight favourites is Smoking Bert Cooper, isn't it?
Yeah, he is.
And you're in a bit of denial about Bert, aren't you? Now, I went and met Bert a couple of years ago, didn't I, in Pennsylvania, around the time of Cotto Margarito 2 in New York.
Yeah.
I think I rented a car and went to somewhere just south of Philadelphia, and somewhere not particularly pleasant either. And I tracked him down, and I spent the morning with Bert and did an interview with him for the magazine. Took some pictures of Bert as he is today. I think his T-shirt said "Still Smoking" on it. But as Spencer said in his podcast the other day, I don't know what he was smoking. But yeah, so you had a soft spot for Bert, but Bert still thinks he can become the heavyweight champion of the world, and I think he's 50 odd now. Maybe more, he's 50 odd now. I don't think he's fought in a couple of years, so maybe it was a couple.
He fought about 6 months ago.
So maybe it's dawned on him. But the thing is, you were in denial that he was shot, maybe in jest. But going back to the Paddy Considine story, the Years of the Locust, we've actually uploaded some stuff onto the website, haven't we, this week? So on the website, we've got an interview with Tim Doc Anderson, a prison interview with Tim Doc Anderson that Robert Mlandich wrote for us in 2011, which is a really good read. We've got a book review of The Years of the Locust up there, which George Delaney did for us a while ago. But
2009, yeah.
In 1995, was it? Or 96, 95, the late Jim Brady, who was one of our best American feature writers, he covered the story. And in 1995, Matt, as he talked about Rick Parker and his promotions, he said that Bert Cooper was shot And that was in 1995.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? When in 1995 he just needed a long training camp smoking Bert, that's all, and to stay off the smoke.
He just needed to stay in the training camp. That was the thing. I think the camps were always set up for him. He just kept
No,
getting out of there.
I'm not sure what it was about smoking Bert Cooper that I liked. I liked him on the way
The
up.
fights when it had to be. Ray
Yeah,
Mercer, Holyfield,
it was the way that
Michael
he fought.
Moorer.
Yeah, it was the way that he fought as well. And I remember him coming up as a cruiserweight, and he was like a wrecking ball at cruiserweight. And then he moved up to heavyweight, and he knocked out Willie DeWitt in 2 rounds. And I thought, this guy's going to beat Tyson. I mean, I was quite young at the time, but I was quite excited about the prospect of a Tyson smoking Bert Cooper fight. And then I think he lost to Carl Truth Williams.
And Tyson started dodging him, yeah.
So yeah, and then it all kind of went out the window then until he had that renaissance of sorts when he nearly knocked out Evander Holyfield in the first round.
Well, yeah, that was stunning, wasn't it, that fight? And he was a big underdog, came in at late notice, didn't he? And
Yeah.
managed to rejuvenate his career to an extent.
Yeah.
Not to the extent where he can still apply it successfully in 2011, 2012 and 2013 though.
No.
Which is a shame. I mean, we I know we're making light of it, but it's sad. I mean, it's one of the things that I found the hardest actually is meeting guys that you look up to, and they either haven't got two pennies to scratch together, or they're physically damaged from the ring. It's something that's not a nice thing to have to confront or deal with. And obviously I spent a couple of years traveling around America interviewing all the old time fighters from everywhere between New York and Las Vegas and as far north as Toronto and as far south as Miami. Probably interviewed 70 or 80 of them, guys who fought from anywhere between the 40s through to the turn of the century, and didn't find them in many there weren't many success stories out there, which is sad. And so although we joke about jest, we're more although we jest about smoking Bert, we joke because of your passion for smoking Bert and its unhealthiness, not about Bert Cooper himself.
Yeah. I mean, it is an obscure idol to have, smoking Bert Cooper. But
We all have them.
we do exactly. We do.
So on a slightly lighter note, although probably not much, I'd say I will pick out my personal highlight for the mag this week, and I think you should take a bow, Matt.
Okay.
Because I think your feature looking at the career and the position Manny Pacquiao finds himself in now, which isn't flat on the canvas as he was against Marquez at the end of their 4th fight, but the position Pacquiao finds himself in now is a very, very difficult one. And you've spoken to Pacquiao's advisor Michael Cons, you've spoken to Freddie Roach, Manny's trainer, and you've spoken to Ricky Hatton, who found himself in a not too dissimilar position to Pacquiao 3 or 4 years ago. And I think it's a really interesting look from all the different angles about what might be going through Manny Pacquiao's mind as he prepares for his comeback in China in November. I think there's a real nice flavour to it, and there's just so much uncertainty. It's not dissimilar to Chad Dawson against Adonis Stevenson at the start of the weekend, when you have these questions: will the fighter be the same again? Are they ruined? Have they been old too soon, and all the rest of it, and why is too late? I think with Pacquiao, my personal thoughts on that the guy's been in decline for 3 years, and if you don't see that, then you're sort of in the ring, you're burying your head in the sand. I think maybe he's doing stuff that he hasn't done before in training, but I've seen fighters, going back to what we were just talking about, who almost struggle to physically walk. They walk with a stutter in their step from where they've had too many punches, and you put them in gloves, put them on the end of a punch bag, and they look like a contender.
Yeah.
It's amazing
yeah.
the transformation that could come over these people, and although it's a different set of circumstances, I mean, you can look at Pacquiao's trainer, Freddie Roach, who does this remarkable transformation from a guy who can sit behind the desk at the wild card, obviously tremoring with Parkinson's, to a guy who takes his glasses off, slides on the body belt and the pads, and is just mustard on the pads and looks brilliant.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that familiarity of what and going back to what that can sort of remove those shackles, if you will, but they can't hide the truth. And I think ultimately the truth is that Pacquiao's 34, and I don't know a 34-year-old that's getting better.
Adonis Stevenson.
Don't lie, man. It's one punch. It was one punch. You can't safely say he's getting better because he caught Chad Dawson, who might have been weight drained, with one punch. Maybe he will. Maybe this will be a story. Maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah, no, I mean that was intended slightly tongue in cheek, but Stevenson certainly hasn't had. But Stevenson
have the courage of your convictions to back them up.
Stevenson certainly hasn't had the fights that Pacquiao has. Stevenson's career is comparatively still in its infancy. I'll take on board everything that you said there with Pacquiao, and I agree. You do wonder, and I wondered it when I was writing this article, if where Pacquiao will be in 20 years' time. I mean, he still seems. I mean, I think we're kind of, we're almost, we're thinking about too much doom in Pacquiao's future. But with all of those fights that he's had, and let's not forget the strain that he's put his body under, and that last knockout, it really is a pertinent question. Is Pacquiao finished?
Yeah, I think just to take that one level further, I don't think he'll be finished against Brandon Rios. But in terms of being back at the level where he was 3 or 4 years ago, I think he's gone.
No, I agree, but I also think we've been surprised with people in the past. The first one, the one that springs to mind is Roberto Duran, and that knockout he suffered, I think 1984 in the second round against Thomas Hearns, is one of the most chilling knockouts you'll see, just because of who Duran was. Hands of stone. He was like a man of steel, wasn't he? As well, people didn't do that to Roberto Duran. And although he wasn't the same fighter, he added layers to his greatness by what he went on to do against Iran Barkley and win the middleweight title. So has Pacquiao got something like that within him? I wouldn't be that surprised if he had.
Okay, let's just finish this up and we'll look ahead to the fights this weekend. There's a couple that I'm quite looking forward to. In Philadelphia, in Bethlehem in Pennsylvania, not too far from where I met Smoking Burt a couple of years ago.
All right, stop rubbing it in.
You have a couple of heavyweight fights. We had Artur Spitzker against Brian Minto, which I think we'll probably see Minto getting busted up and stopped. He's an 8-1 underdog. Spitzker 14-1 on. Bryant Jennings against Andre Fedosov. Jennings, the unbeaten Philadelphia, on 1-6 on. Fedosov 9-2 against fair odds. Wouldn't fancy Fedosov, and that could see a points victory for Jennings. What's interesting here is Sergey Kovalev and Cornelius White. I like that fight.
It's a good fight. Is it an eliminator? It should be. They're both pretty highly ranked, aren't they?
I think it is an IBF eliminator.
Yeah.
There's talk that Kovalev could be Nathan Cleverley's next opponent.
Yeah, it's a bit. So I mean, we cover that a little bit in the magazine this week. I mean, he's coming off a sensational result, isn't he? Was it in third or fourth round?
Kovalev doesn't seem blown away by Cleverley, does he? Let's just say that.
No, that poor old Cleverley. I don't think Adonis Stevenson was the week before either, was he?
No, yeah. I think those guys will be giving the British Isles a wide berth, won't they? But yeah, who knows? Kovalev could be here, and he's got Cornelius White to address first. So
yeah, he has, and I think you've got to make he's got to pronounce his surname. You've got to make him a favourite over White. But it's a good matchup. It's definitely a good matchup, and it's good to see two guys kind of on the outskirts, kind of pushing for a place in the top 10 by fighting each other.
Kovalev, a real danger man, because he's the guy who wiped out Gabriel Campillo,
yeah,
who was one of the most avoided men in the division for some time. So, I mean, credit where he's due. Not only fighting the guy no one wants to fight, but taking him out too. Highlight for me is going to be on Box Nation and HBO in the US this week. I really like the fight, Mickey Garcia against Juan Manuel Lopez. I like the fight. Maybe I like the fight more thinking romantically that Lopez is the same fighter he was 3 years ago, though.
Do you know what? I think he probably is still the same fighter 3 years ago, and that might be part of the problem. He's. I know what you're saying. If he had that kind of buzz around him. I think this would be huge. This would be huge. But yeah, Garcia, I was really impressed with what he did against Salido to take the title, who's twice beaten Lopez. It's understandable why Garcia is a favourite, but Lopez, one of the biggest punchers in the game. You can't write big punches off, as Adonis Stevenson showed last weekend.
Do you know what? Lopez, a 4-1 underdog. It's big odds, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, but you can base the fact that just because Salido stood up to Lopez's best shots, doesn't necessarily mean that Garcia will.
I think. Do you know what? I think looking back, we've missed some big fights over the years. Obviously Pacquiao, Mayweather springs to mind. What else springs to your mind? There's a few that have gone by the wayside. Some more recently than others. Obviously, there was a lot of hype about Fury and Price both meeting when they're undefeated.
Yeah.
But I think one that irks me arguably more than any other.
Bert Cooper against Vitaly Klitschko is another.
Yeah, of course. How did that one slip under the radar? So this is getting unhealthy. I think we'll see if HR can sort out some counselling. But one of the ones that really gets me, really bugs me that we missed out on was Gamboa and Juan Manuel Lopez when that was hot.
Yeah.
Because that was a fight that they weren't two massive names, but people in the business wanted it. And Top Rank, who do a good job historically of bringing through fighters at the right time, they were bringing those guys through to fight each other. And they just dragged out too long. And sometimes you've got to strike while the iron's hot. I've said it before in the column. There's hot and there's piping hot. And the difference between the two isn't massive. But I think it's to do with too many people looking at that one golden egg of a fight and not wanting the silver egg. And I think there's more money that you could get from 3 silver eggs than 1 gold one. So if Lopez and Gamboa had fought the first time and it was a great fight, and you put it on again and you got a ready-made attraction.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's a shame that wasn't made, and I think. It was only 18 months ago, something like that, 2 years ago, where we would have been really, really excited about Lopez Gamboa. And if you'd have told us then that Gamboa would be on an undercard in Montreal, boring everybody stupid, Lopez would be a massive underdog trying to rescue his career in that amount of time, we'd have been like, no way, because Lopez and Gamboa both looked to be
shooting stars.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Unstoppable shooting stars almost.
And I think it's sad, but you know what? There's not much optimist left in me, I've got to say. But so the optimist in me thinks, what would have happened to the sport had over the last 2 or 3 years Mayweather had a trilogy with Pacquiao?
I think, yeah, I agree with what you're alluding to. It would be huge, wouldn't it? I think you have to. I think the sport has to produce. I mean, we're kind of in danger of getting into an hour-long conversation about this now, but the sport has to produce those kind of fights. When something is good and 2 fighters, and the public wants to see 2 fighters together, we want to see the best fight the best. It has to happen. It's sport. I know there's a business here, but it's also to retain credence as a sport, the best has to fight the best.
Yeah, exactly. And to retain it as a business, you have to attract masses of
course.
And the way to attract that is provide the best product, and the best product is matching the best with the best.
Yeah, of course it is.
So that will do us for this week, I think. Anything else you'd like to add? Not Bert Cooper related?
No, then.
Oh dear. Sure, we'll get plenty of it in the office anyway. All right. Well, look, thanks a lot for joining us this week, guys. Much appreciated, as always. We're really pleased with how the podcast is doing. Really pleased that you guys are tuning in each week. And we look forward to joining you next week, where the chief preview will be something you're taking a close look on as we speak, or at least after we speak, which is Adrian Broner moving up 2 weights to fight Paulie Malignaggi. I was one of the, I'm not sure if I would dare say lucky few, but one of the few people there to witness the press conference when it all went off in Las Vegas on, I think, May the 3rd or May the 4th. It was the morning of the Mayweather-Guerrero fight. So I will provide some colour, not as much colour as they did in the morning. I'll provide some colour about that next week. And then we'll have a cursory look through what else is coming your way in the summer. Also, we'll talk about next week's issue, which is the June 20th issue, which features our power list, which is the top 50 most influential people in the sport today. So once again, thanks a lot for listening, and we'll be back with you next week.
Get involved with all the best boxing banter at our forum, and that's forum.boxingnewsonline.net.